Do you believe Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. were truly enemies? Were their philosophies irreconcilable? Or were they in fact two sides of the same coin fighting for the same goal, racial equality, just with different weapons? Join us on this journey as we delve into the complex relationship between these two iconic figures. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. were the giants of the civil rights movement, yet their names are often uttered in hushed whispers, separated by an invisible line in history. America in the 1950s and 60s was a tinderbox of racial tension. Segregation and discrimination were the law of the land, casting a long shadow over the lives of millions of African Americans. It was in this cauldron of injustice that two voices rose above the din, each offering a different path toward freedom. Martin Luther King Jr., the apostle of nonviolent resistance, with a soaring dream of racial harmony, and Malcolm X, the fiery revolutionary, preached self-defense and black self-reliance. Let's explore their contrasting philosophies, the role of the media in creating a false dichotomy, and the enduring impact of their legacies on the struggle for racial justice today. The Civil Rights Movement, 1950s through the 1960s. To fully understand the relationship between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., we must first step back and go through the canvas of America in the 1950s and 60s. It was a nation grappling with the deep scars of slavery and the lingering injustices that festered in its wake. Imagine a world where black and white weren't just colors, but dividing lines etched into every aspect of life. Segregation ruled with an iron fist, dictating where you could live, learn, eat, even drink. Public buses, schools, restaurants, and even water fountains were segregated, forcing African Americans into a shadow society and denying them the basic dignities and rights afforded to their white counterparts. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a denial of humanity. Black families were trapped in cycles of poverty, denied access to quality education and employment, and subjected to the constant threat of violence and intimidation. Jim Crow laws were the teeth of this oppressive system, while the brutal realities of lynchings and police brutality was its ugly claw. The Civil Rights Movement, like a tidal wave of human dignity, began to gather momentum. From the Montgomery bus boycott, led by Rosa Parks and Dr. King, to the sit-ins at lunch counters and the freedom rides challenging interstate segregation, the movement refused to be silenced. It was a chorus of voices, demanding equality, justice, and an end to the suffocating grip of Jim Crow. This was the stage upon which Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. emerged. Two towering figures, each with a unique vision for achieving the same dream, a dream of a truly free and equal America for all its citizens. But the paths they would choose, the tools they would use, and the shadows that the media would cast upon their relationship would become a story in itself. Different paths, but the same goal. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. represented two distinct but equally valid approaches to the same goal. Malcolm X championed self-defense and black reliance, while Martin Luther King Jr. advocated for nonviolent resistance and integration. Their voices, forever etched in history, continue to inspire and challenge us, reminding us that the fight for justice and equality is an ongoing journey, paved with both fiery defiance and an unwavering hope. Malcolm X. Malcolm X's life was a testament to the harsh realities of segregation and its brutal effects. Born Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska in 1925, he witnessed firsthand the racism that poisoned American society. Tragedy struck with the death of his father, leaving the family to grapple with poverty and discrimination. Malcolm's early experiences, fraught with adversity, would shape a worldview steeped in resilience, self-reliance, and an unyielding quest for justice. Malcolm's journey took a profound turn during his incarceration when he discovered the teachings of the Nation of Islam. Embracing Islam, he shed his surname Little, symbolizing the rejection of his family's legacy of enslavement. Expelled from school at 15, he faced poverty, discrimination, and even prison, where he encountered the Nation of Islam, also known as NOI. The NOI's message of black self-determination and self-defense resonated deeply with Malcolm, offering an alternative to the oppressive status quo. His association with the Nation of Islam, led by Elijah Muhammad, catapulted him into a prominent role. His articulate speeches and commitment to the tenets of the Nation of Islam made him a rising star within the movement. Malcolm X became a powerful voice for the NOI, preaching black pride and self-reliance. He advocated for self-defense against white aggression, famously stating, "We have no program for integration, assimilation, or separation. We have a program of self-determination." His message of Pan-Africanism, promoting unity among black people worldwide, resonated with many disillusioned by the slow pace of change in America. Malcolm X's advocacy extended beyond religious principles, embracing the Nation of Islam's philosophy of black separatism. He championed economic self-sufficiency and community empowerment. Malcolm X's fiery speeches challenged America's conscience, demanding freedom and equality, not through pleas for integration, but through any means necessary. In the face of escalating racial violence, Malcolm took a controversial stance on self-defense, arguing that African Americans had the right to protect themselves from systematic oppression. His powerful address at the 1964 Organization of Afro-American Unity Summit in Cairo, OAU, advocating for armed self-defense and Pan-African solidarity, stands as a testament to his unwavering commitment to black liberation. As Malcolm X rose to prominence, the media played a pivotal role in shaping public perception. Initial portrayals often focused on his fiery rhetoric and confrontational style, painting him as a radical figure challenging the status quo. Martin Luther King Jr. Born on January 15, 1929, in the heart of the American South, Atlanta, Georgia, Martin Luther King Jr. emerged from a lineage deeply entrenched in the African American church tradition. Raised in a segregated society, young Martin experienced the harsh realities of racial discrimination from an early age. His parents instilled in him the values of resilience and determination, fostering a sense of purpose that would later shape his destiny. King's educational journey in racial segregated schools exposed him to the stark inequalities of the Jim Crow South, fueling his desire for change. His formative years laid the groundwork for a future leader who would champion civil rights with unparalleled conviction. The spark that ignited King's leadership came during the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. His involvement in the protest against racial segregation on public transportation catapulted him into the forefront of the civil rights movement. In the aftermath of his pivotal event, King played a key role in founding the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957. At the helm of the SCLC, King led the charge for civil rights through nonviolent means, drawing inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. His charisma and eloquence made him a powerful force for change, capturing the hearts and minds of a nation yearning for justice. Dr. King's commitment to nonviolent resistance became the cornerstone of his activism. Infused with Christian teachings of love and forgiveness, he orchestrated a series of peaceful protests, marches, and acts of civil disobedience to challenge racial injustice. His strategy aimed not only at legislative change, but also at transforming the hearts and minds of the American people. Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, delivered at the March on Washington in 1963, remains a beacon of hope and a defining moment in the civil rights movement. He spoke of a beloved community where race wouldn't divide, where justice would prevail, and where little black boys and little white boys would be able to join hands as brothers. His philosophy of nonviolence extended beyond mere tactics, urging love and forgiveness even in the face of hate and brutality. Dr. King's leadership in marches like the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, where he faced tear gas and billy clubs, showcased his unwavering commitment to nonviolent protest. His powerful sermons and speeches like Letter from Birmingham Jail eloquently articulated the moral case for racial equality and challenged the conscience of a nation. As King's prominence grew, so did the media's attention. News outlets depicted him as a symbol of hope, a charismatic leader advocating for a more just society. However, the contrast between King's nonviolent approach and the more assertive stance of figures like Malcolm X led to nuanced portrayals. Media coverage ranged from admiration to criticism, reflecting the complexities of public perception during this tumultuous period. While Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. navigated different paths to achieve racial equality, one constant loomed in the shadows: the watchful eye of the FBI. Directed by J. Edgar Hoover. This omnipresent surveillance not only aimed to undermine their movements, but also fueled a climate of fear and mistrust that exacerbated tensions between the two leaders and their supporters. As voices advocating for justice and equality grew louder, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, turned its watchful eye toward those at the forefront. Both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. found themselves under intense FBI scrutiny. Wiretaps, infiltration, and the compilation of extensive dossiers became the tools of surveillance. The government, in its pursuit of control, sought to understand, monitor, and sometimes undermine the leaders who dared to challenge the status quo. The FBI viewed both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. as threats to national security. Malcolm X's affiliation with the Nation of Islam and his calls for self-defense triggered alarms, leading to extensive monitoring of his movements and communications. Likewise, Dr. King's nonviolent protests, despite their peaceful nature, were seen as a potential catalyst for social unrest, prompting the FBI to infiltrate the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and engage in illegal wiretapping. FBI made blatant attempts to disrupt the movement. This surveillance went beyond mere observation. The infamous COINTELPRO, or counterintelligence program, emerged as a sinister weapon in the government's arsenal. Covert actions ranged from spreading false rumors to exacerbating existing tensions between activists. The goal was to create divisions, fuel internal conflicts, and ultimately weaken the collective strength of the civil rights movement. With a mandate to disrupt civil rights organizations, COINTELPRO targeted not only Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., but also aimed to sow seeds of discord within the broader movement. The FBI actively sought to discredit both leaders. In Malcolm X's case, they leaked information to the media portraying him as a violent extremist. For Dr. King, the FBI sent him anonymous letters containing fabricated details about his personal life, aiming to sow dissension within the SCLC and damage his reputation. The orchestrated attempts to create rifts within the movement cast a shadow over the relationship between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. The pervasive atmosphere of suspicion created by the FBI's actions played a significant role in amplifying existing tensions. Media often pitted the two against each other, highlighting their contrasting tactics and overlooking their shared goal of racial equality. This constant scrutiny and manufactured discord prevented genuine understanding and collaboration, ultimately weakening the collective force of the civil rights movement. As the 1960s unfolded, both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. underwent profound transformations in their perspectives marked by personal growth, changing circumstances, and an ever-shifting socio-political landscape. Beneath the surface of contrasting tactics and public statements existed a layer of mutual respect and a shared yearning for a better future for Black Americans. Despite their divergent philosophies, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. acknowledged and praised each other's contributions to the civil rights movement. Malcolm X referred to Dr. King as his brother in the fight, expressing admiration for his leadership and charisma. After parting ways with the Nation of Islam in 1964, Malcolm X embarked on a journey of ideological reevaluation. His pilgrimage to Mecca exposed him to a more inclusive Islam and a global perspective that transcended racial divides. Rejecting the separatist stance of his earlier years, Malcolm began advocating for a united front in the fight against racial injustice. His evolving perspective embraced collaboration with other civil rights leaders, signaling a departure from the strict doctrines of the Nation of Islam. In turn, while disagreeing with some of Malcolm X's views, King recognized his power to stir Black consciousness and ignite a spirit of defiance. Martin Luther King Jr.'s activism expanded beyond the boundaries of civil rights. King, a staunch advocate of nonviolence, grew increasingly critical of U.S. policies, notably the Vietnam War. Both leaders recognized that the struggle for civil rights extended beyond legal reforms. It encompassed dismantling systematic economic inequalities. Malcolm and King shared a vision of addressing poverty as an essential component of the broader fight for justice. These pronouncements, often overshadowed by heated rhetoric, illustrate the underlying respect each held for the other's unique contribution to the struggle. Contrary to popular perception, Malcolm X's fiery advocacy and Dr. King's nonviolent resistance weren't contradictory, but rather complementary forces pushing towards the same goal. Malcolm X's strong stance on self-defense resonated with those disillusioned with the slow pace of progress, while Dr. King's unwavering commitment to nonviolence garnered international support and exposed the brutality of segregation to the world. Each approach, catering to different segments of the Black community and generating pressure from different angles, served to advance the cause of racial equality, albeit in distinct ways. Both participated in the March on Washington in 1963, a monumental demonstration of unity against segregation. Additionally, Malcolm X expressed support for Dr. King's Voting Rights Act campaign, recognizing its potential to empower Black communities. These moments of shared purpose, though overshadowed by public disagreements, serve as reminders that their paths, while divergent, occasionally intersected in the fight for a common cause. While Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. navigated their paths toward racial equality, a sinister element slithered in the background: white supremacy. Fueled by hatred and fear, these organizations and individuals exploited the perceived divisions between the leaders, utilizing violence and manipulation to weaken the civil rights movement from within. White supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan and the John Birch Society saw the contrasting philosophies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. as an opportunity to sow discord. They amplified the media's portrayal of Malcolm X as a violent extremist, hoping to alienate moderate white allies and discredit the entire movement. Moreover, they portrayed Dr. King as a controllable moderate, hoping to lull the black community into a false sense of progress while maintaining the white power structure. White supremacist groups weren't content with mere manipulation. They employed brutal tactics to silence black leaders and intimidate their followers. Church bombings, targeted assassinations, and threats of violence were commonplace, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that hampered organizing efforts and stifled dissent. The brutal murders of Medgar Evers, Viola Liuzzo, and countless others stand as stark reminders of the lengths white supremacists were willing to go to maintain their grip on power. By portraying Malcolm X as a dangerous radical and Dr. King as a safe moderate, white supremacists benefited twofold. Malcolm X's fiery rhetoric, though powerful, could be easily dismissed as dangerous extremism, isolating him from mainstream support and weakening his influence. Meanwhile, Dr. King's nonviolent approach, while garnering international acclaim, could be contained and co-opted within the existing power structure, allowing white supremacists to maintain control over the pace and direction of change. The lives of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. reached untimely and tragic ends, leaving an indelible mark on the pages of history. The promise of a brighter future was shattered on February 21, 1965, when Malcolm X was assassinated in New York City. His untimely death sent shockwaves through the civil rights movement, leaving a void that could never be filled. Just 3 years later, on April 4, 1968, the world mourned the loss of Martin Luther King Jr. as he fell victim to an assassin's bullet in Memphis, Tennessee. The dreamer who envisioned equality and justice for all was silenced. Malcolm X's death cast a sad light on the complexities of his journey, prompting a reevaluation of his legacy. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, occurring against a backdrop of civil unrest and a struggle for justice, added layers of poignancy to his already profound impact. The assassinations of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. not only robbed the world of two influential leaders, but also profoundly impacted public perception and historical narratives. The assassinations of Malcolm X and Dr. King cast a long shadow of grief and doubt over the civil rights movement. While new leaders emerged to carry the torch, the movement undeniably changed course, grappling with internal divisions and searching for a new path forward. The brutal slayings of Malcolm X in 1965 and Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968 sent shockwaves through the civil rights movement and the nation as a whole. In the wake of these tragedies, the nonviolent resistance championed by Dr. King faced growing skepticism. Many within the black community, disillusioned by the slow pace of progress and shaken by the brutal reality of violence, embraced Malcolm X's call for self-defense and black self-reliance. This shift in sentiment led to the rise of black power movements, advocating for armed self-defense and community empowerment. These weren't mere losses of iconic figures. They were brutal reminders of the deep-seated racial hatred that still festered within American society. The impact of their death resonates even today, shaping the trajectory of the movement and influencing the ongoing fight for racial justice. Their legacies don't exist in isolation. They continue to shape the conversation about race, justice, and social change. Leaders like Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, James Baldwin, and countless others, each with their unique experiences and philosophies, played crucial roles in shaping the movement's direction and impact. Ignoring their contributions is like viewing a masterpiece through a pinhole, missing the richness and depth of the entire work. From Black Lives Matter protests to debates over police reform, the voices of Malcolm X and Dr. King resonate through the decades, offering valuable perspectives and reminding us of the unfinished work of the civil rights movement. As we conclude on lives of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., it is crucial to reflect on the intricate dynamics that shaped their journey through the tumultuous waters of the civil rights movement. According to historian Robin D. G. Kelly, while often portrayed as rivals, Malcolm X and King were more allies on different battlefields. King's nonviolence shone a light on racial injustice on the global stage, while Malcolm's bold advocacy for black self-reliance empowered those yearning for immediate action. Both were vital forces, pushing the movement forward from different angles. Malcolm X's exposure to racism and incarceration fueled his belief in self-defense and black unity. King, influenced by Christian teachings and the Montgomery bus boycott, embraced nonviolence as a way to expose the moral bankruptcy of segregation. Though different paths, their shared goal was dismantling the machinery of racial oppression. The relationship between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. was not a simplistic tale of adversaries. It was a nuanced narrative, marked by occasional convergence, yet defined by the diversity of their approaches to the fight for civil rights. As we conclude this journey, let us not only remember the legacies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., it surely indicates a profound reflection on the societal forces that shaped and distorted their narratives. By understanding the intricacies of the past, we gain a clearer vision of the path forward, a path where the legacies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. can continue to guide us toward a more just and equitable world.